This is Fantology.
You may have heard of us.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Fantology. My name is Jake, and I'm here with my lifelong friends, Ryan, Ben, and Josh. We're missing Steven today.
Yeah. Jake, you had a perfect, what's up, Belters? This is an easy one.
What's up, Belters? Welcome back to another episode of Fantology. I'm your host, Jake, and I'm here with my lifelong friends, Ryan, Ben, and Josh. We're missing Steven today. We'll be reviewing Leviathan Wakes, the first book in the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey. Two things. We're missing Steven. Fortunately, we couldn't convince him to read this book with us.
Slacker.
So yeah, give him a lot of crap in Discord and in comments and all that stuff. Second thing I was going to say is I'm really self-conscious that I'm in my new place and this room sounds very echoey to me. I don't know how it's sounding to you guys, but first time recording in the new place, and I think I'm going to have to throw some pads or something in here.
Yeah, it maybe sounds a little echoey, but I think it's fine, really.
Jake, I must say your beard game is on point today. I'm noticing it. It looks. Did you go to the barber recently? Sorry.
No, it's terrible. You should see you can't see it because of the definition of the recording, but I haven't shaved in a really long time, and the straggler hairs up here are half an inch long. It's looking pretty rough in real life.
Okay, well.
But I appreciate it. That made me feel good because we've been moving, and so I've just had no time for anything like that. I don't even know where my razor is right now or trimmer, and I'm how long can I push this? I definitely have to find that stuff this weekend, I think. But
you know who probably has a great beard? Jim Holden.
Jim Holden, yeah.
Nice segue.
Nice segue.
Nice
I want to hear your guys' overall thoughts on the book.
Yeah,
any hot takes?
Well, okay, yeah. Wait, I want to talk about before we get into our overall thoughts. I want to talk about how this book kind of resonated within the overall fantasy community. I know a lot of people. For me, even if they haven't read a lot of books, they've seen this TV show. So let's talk about the hype surrounding this. I mean, I'm sure most of our listeners know that this is a Amazon Prime TV show, but
yeah, I will say I did watch the first season of the Amazon adaptation before reading this, and I wonder how much that's going to affect my thoughts and feelings of the book itself.
So as far as the adaptation, it was originally done by the Sci-Fi Channel, I believe. And later on, it was, I think, maybe canceled or sold to Amazon. I don't know if it happened in that order or what have you. But I think it's one of the more popular book adaptations, and that a lot of book fans are also fans of the TV show. I think the common consensus that I've read is people will say they're both great. The books are probably a little bit better than the TV show. So if you like the TV show, you'll probably like the books as well. And for me personally, I watched, I think, maybe 3.5 seasons of the TV show before I decided to go back and start reading. And I did really like the TV show. Some of the actors were a little bit maybe not quite my favorite, and sometimes I would notice little things about their acting that I didn't like, especially for the main characters who play Jim Holden and Detective Miller.
Yeah.
But I still really enjoyed the TV show, and I did enjoy the books, or the first book as well. That's all I've read. So yeah, Ben, did you have anything you wanted to add as far as the TV show or the place this has in the sci-fi fantasy community?
Yeah, I mean, just that, like I said, I know a few people I work with, they all are big fans of the TV show. And so they kept on asking me if I've watched the TV show, if I've read it, because they know I'm a fan of, fantasy and sci-fi. And I never had. So I feel like we're a bit late to the game, but
for sure. The last book came out last year, this past year.
and the final TV season, right? And I think
so.
I remember I watched the first season, and it was kind of one of those, I liked it, but I knew I wanted to read the books eventually, so I figured I would do them more in tandem. So I kind of put that on pause. But overall, I enjoyed the TV show. I enjoyed the book quite a bit more, I think. But yeah, it's just like weird how I feel like because there wasn't a ton of pressure on either the TV show or the books, like they thrived, like there wasn't all this attention paid to them. So they just like kind of had a bit more room to just kind of be themselves. And weren't the books also like self-published originally, or am I making that up?
I have the Wikipedia article up. Let's see what they say.
While Jake's doing that, I'll kind of be the pooper of this party. I've watched the first episode of the show probably like 3 times, always with the intention of getting into it. And for some reason, I just haven't been able to. I don't know why, but there's that. And so I think I need to just like get through the first season. Yeah, kind of force it, because everybody who has opinions that I trust all really like it. So I just need to kind of watch it. I don't know.
To be fair, so do you think that your thoughts on the first episode affected your thoughts on the book, or is that where you're going with that? Or
not really, because it's been a minute since I tried watching it. I think the last time I tried watching it was probably like a year ago. I first tried watching it, like, I think when the second season was coming out, like it was still when it was still on Sci-Fi. And then I think I tried watching it one time in between those two, and I just haven't been able to get into it. I don't know why. It's not like I didn't not like it. Like there was anything like while I was watching it, I'm like, nope, I'm not going to watch this. It was just like, I watched it. I think the first time I watched the first 3 episodes or something. And then I just didn't ever feel compelled to keep watching it, type thing. So
to be fair, so I watched the first season because I had heard good things from people in our Discord who really like The Expanse. And so I was like, I'll give it a shot. And I was like, not really a big fan of the first season until the last few episodes, when they start to tie together, like you start to unravel some of the mysteries that have been going on, because the first book and the first season are almost like 1-to-1 as far as an adaptation and as far as like timeline. And the first book is kind of this detective story. And so towards the end, I was getting some answers. I was like, oh, this is really cool. But I was kind of put off by it kind of had like a Sci-Fi Channel production level, I'd say, to an extent, like in terms of like acting or writing. Like I was kind of put off by it until like the plot started to grip me. Anyways, I didn't continue the show because I was kind of, I don't know. It was like, oh, that was decent. And then I was thinking about the show a few years later and about to rewatch it to then start the second season, when again, members of our Discord were kind of hyping up the whole series. And that's when I was like, well, maybe I should just read it. And in my opinion, the book it got everything that's good in the show, the book has, but I think the book is written better than the first season of the show is written. And so I think it's like the better way, for me, it was the better way to experience that story. So I wonder how it affected I wonder how your take on the book itself was similar or different than your take on the show.
One interesting thing about the way they structure the TV show is the climax of the first book takes place basically halfway through the second season of the TV show.
Yeah, sorry, I said that wrong. Yeah.
I think they take parts of the second book and insert it into the first season, and take some of the parts of the first book and they're in the second season as well. So it's structured a bit differently than I would have expected.
Yeah, the first season is more like half the first book with some of book 2, I guess, which I haven't started at all.
Yeah. Another interesting thing that I wanted to talk about before we get in, maybe we can do really quickly before we get into the plot line and the characters and things like that, is just that James S.A. Corey is actually a pseudonym for two separate authors. They write under the same name. And I believe one author writes the James Holden chapters and the other author writes the Miller chapters. So
cool.
it's kind of an interesting way of writing. And publishing. It reminds me sort of like the duo of Steven Erikson and Ian Esselmont, who write the Malazan books. And it's just kind of cool to see how people are able to work together in writing. And it doesn't seem jarring to me, like it's two different people writing one book. I mean, maybe you guys disagree, but it seemed pretty seamless for me.
Yeah, well, that's a good transition, Ryan. And I want to go back and correct myself. I guess Orbit originally published it in 2011, so it wasn't self-published. But Ryan, it's interesting that I know that they kind of co-wrote it, but I didn't realize they'd split it up like that. And it's interesting because my one criticism for this book is that Miller and Holden almost seem like the same person to me. Like
Really?
Yeah, you didn't think that? Oh my goodness. I thought they just like
they're completely, they're like polar opposite. They're like foils of each other.
Okay, they were like foils, but like they still I don't know, like they still like think the same. Maybe not like about like there's all sorts of gray in terms of how they think, but like their thought process just seems much more like, I don't know, like sometimes I would forget which like person I was reading. Here's my take on that, because I kind of agree with Ben, but maybe for a little bit different reasons. And this is kind of one of my main critiques of the book, is it seems like they were always able to just come up with the answer to whatever solution, like to whatever situation they were in. They could kind of just know what to do next. And it didn't seem like they had to work that hard to do it. Like they would either kind of had already come across the answer that they needed earlier on in the book. Yeah.
I feel like that doesn't have anything to do with Ben Says. You're just
criticism. No, because it's they both.
we're not to that point
I'm
yet.
Too hot on the mic. They both do it though. That's the thing, is that like both of the characters kind of solve problems the same way by just like kind of knowing the answer to the problem. And I feel like both those characters do it, which is why they seemed similar to me, and connecting that back to what Ben said. I mean, they're both very like capable middle-aged men who are trying to do the right thing but sometimes failing. Like sure, they might have different philosophies on life and stuff, but like they still feel like, especially like if I was to compare like them to like Matt and Rand, like those two characters, I can just like there's all sorts of differences, but if I was to compare like Miller and Holden, they just kind of seem interchangeable to me a lot of the time. That might be the hottest take of the episode. I still liked it, but
I don't think.
Did Ben, you feel like their voices were similar? Like they were similarly written, but they were very. Because I mean, I agree with Jake that they were different characters and their views and their upbringing, but like and like they were very different in my head, but I don't know how much of that was because I watched the show before, and so I feel like I don't know, I had already differentiated them very well before I had even read the book.
I don't know.
I will say that the characters are probably the weakest part of this book. Like they're not super fully developed and like you would find in like a fantasy book. And in that sense, it's more like a traditional sci-fi book. But I don't know. They're they're similar in that they're both determined and they think what they're doing is right. But that's not like almost every main character thinks what they're doing is right. Like I don't know how that's I don't see that as something of like, oh, they're the same person because what they're doing is right.
No, I see your point, but like I don't know, just like even the amount of like navel gazing versus action that they participate in, it just feels like I don't know, it feels like they're kind of interchangeable, especially and it's especially weird to me knowing that they're written by two different people. because it just felt like it was one person trying to write two different characters, but kind of not really succeeding all that well.
Well, okay, so this is who Miller is, in my opinion. Miller is somebody who thinks like, who is very much more the ends justify the means. And that's like, that's how he's driven. And he's like, not sure where he fits in, like in society, because he's a belter who works for like an Earth corporation, and he's trying to like do the good he can, but like has a jaded view of the world, like is like pretty cynical. And then like his plot line is coming to realize, or maybe not coming to realize, but his plot line is starting to really believe in something and care about something when he hasn't really believed in or cared about things before. Like he's been a little more nihilistic. And James Holden is the opposite. He's super idealistic. That's why you, like Josh, you mentioned like Holden, like both of them just solve problems out of nowhere, like in the same way. Holden just like creates problems more than he solves them in this book. Like he plays into the hands of Protogen like every step of the way.
That is true. That's a good point.
And he's like, his thing is, no, this is the right thing to do. It's like Skybreaker versus Windrunner, whereas he's more the Skybreaker, like, no, people need to know the truth, so I'm going to broadcast the truth. And he, you know, let the repercussions happen. And that's why he butts head with Miller so much, because Miller is like, no, like, you need to understand how dangerous this is and act accordingly, and like fib when you need to and tell the truth when you need to. So in my head, they're just completely different.
Okay, so that might be the difference between like lawful good and chaotic good, right? But like still there's like a similarity to me where, you know, like you're saying, Holden just no, but like Holden just like, yeah, broadcast it. But similar to like Miller, how he just like I guess spoilers, but like he just shoots the scientist guy at the end. Like they're both very like, oh, this needs to happen, just do it. Like, I'm just going to do it, you know? Like,
yeah, well, and that's, I mean, they're both characters who do what they think is right.
Right, yeah. So I guess,
Which is why they're such good foils for each other.
Right. Okay. I guess the voice, maybe not the actions, but for me, the voice was very similar between them.
And I sorry to go off what Ryan was saying, I think having seen the first season of the TV show did help me really distinguish the two in terms of voicing.
I think we have discussed this in depth, and I want to I just looked it up, and they do so looking at the writing process, the authors alternate chapters, and they write for different characters each, but then after they each write they write the chapter, then they swap and they each revise the other person's work. So they do said at the end of the process, it would be hard to identify which line was written by which author. So I think through the revision process, you know, they both contribute significant. I mean, obviously you'd have to.
Yeah,
they both contribute significantly to each character, even if one might initially write one.
I liked your Steven Erikson comparison. I thought the same thing, just because it's, you know, two authors. It's a little different. This is two authors under one name, whereas Malazan is two authors under two different names. But I don't know if this is true, but I was listening to a YouTube video by Alt Shift X, and they said that this story as well started as a tabletop RPG, which is why in the beginning, a few characters just die pretty abruptly, and it was because those people they were playing with quit the game. So the characters just like, was it the doctor guy in the very beginning? Shad. Yeah.
And so that is interesting. Another like duo team of that similarity, where they had both started with an RPG and kind of built the world. I think it might have been one person. It says one of the authors set up the science fiction universe, but they both probably were involved. And it included the other author as a player.
I will say I kind of like the fact that like a few people died at the start, because it definitely like raised the stakes a little bit. You know what I mean? I wish that would have continued throughout it, but it was nice.
Do you remember any other of the characters who had died? Maybe that like Martian lieutenant. I'm blanking on his name, who kind of escorts them to the shuttle, and then
I remember
dies.
everyone.
The guy that dies in
like-
the riot, right?
No, not a riot. You know, as they're escaping the Donager before it's getting
Yeah.
blown up by the stealth ship.
The guy who like escorts them from the
Yeah.
holding place to the escape pod,
It seemed like he wasn't in it for too long.
or to the
though.
Rocinante, I guess.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, his whole crew, their whole crew in the very beginning, when they're on the Scapulae. Yeah. Well, I guess we talked a little bit about one aspect of it, but I guess we can just go around like, what are some strengths and weaknesses we saw of it? Who wants to start? Josh, let's let Josh go. Let's start with the weaknesses.
Yeah, Josh.
okay.
Ready. Well, I kind of
Josh
already
has
talked.
been bagging on this book the whole time he was reading it.
No, I didn't. Oh no, there was some bagging going on.
Josh,
You're
we're picking
Frodo
up
with
the
all those
drama.
baggins. Okay, all right. So we already kind of mentioned. I think I've just discovered about myself that I'm a very character focused reader. Like, I just think I need strong characters to really connect with the book. That doesn't mean that I think books are bad. Like, I kind of read the first two Malazan books, and like we were talking about it earlier, but it was hard for me to really want to continue because although I think the characters are well done, they weren't there wasn't enough
driving
of
the
them.
plot the same way.
Yeah, there weren't enough of the characters, I guess, to help me really get invested in the rest of the plot. So to a lesser extent, because I think I was able to connect a little bit easier to the characters in this book, maybe because they were just a little bit more like normal characters, but they by far, in my opinion, were the weakest of this first book. I'm sure that they get better as the series goes on. I'm sure that, and I think that like I have every hope that as I continue the series, I will start really connecting with these characters. But I felt like the main characters, Holden and Miller, were fine to good. Like they were compelling, but I felt like pretty much all the side characters weren't. And the ones that were just confined to like either the role of the love interest or the role like they were kind of just, here's what this person's going to do, and they're going to just kind of fill that role. None of these are like deal breakers, right? Like every book has these things to a certain extent, but these are what stood out to me. And then as well, the pacing was a little bit weird. I felt like going through the book, leading up to the climax, like I felt like there weren't I felt like the beginning was exciting and the very end was exciting, but there was just kind of a lot of things that happened and you didn't know how important they were going to be as you moved on throughout the book. So I felt like the pacing was just a little bit weird. Those are really my main critiques. Like nothing terrible, and like I understand why people like these books, but just the first one wasn't the absolute masterpiece that I was kind of hoping for. So there's my opinion. I think I'm going to kind of go on and kind of spin off of that with your pacing issue. It kind of felt like, your classic fantasy, kind of like the first book of Wheel of Time, where you have like the two main characters going from like town to town, only they're going from like ship to ship, and right before they leave or right after they leave, the ship just like dies. So like there's a certain amount of like plot armor that goes into like these things where it's like, okay, how many times can like these characters like escape situations where like literally like tens of thousands of people die like right around them, you know what I mean? And
well, until the ending, of course.
Well, yeah, sure, but sorry, Miller, I almost said Holden because they're interchangeable, but Miller kind of signs up for that. I mean,
I mean, is there like a lot of plot armor? I guess there's some plot armor like throughout the book with these, narrow escapes that they have like at Eros and off the Donager. And
I mean, they're literally given like life-saving cancer meds, like you think that both of them are going to die because they have their bodies like melting around them, and then
no, it was like a known thing that was in a med kit. They just had to get to the med kit. It's not like they happened upon them,
Sure, yeah. Maybe I still felt like I didn't really connect when it was going on that they were trying to get to the ship because they needed the med kit on the ship. I just thought they were trying to get to the ship like to like be with their friends.
Well,
and
it was
stuff.
both, right?
It was
They
both
needed to escape.
Yeah, I just that whole sequence felt like, okay, like how can they possibly come back from this? They should both be dead right now. But yeah, I mean it's science fiction, so they can, I guess, heal a lot more than what you'd expect. But for me, it felt like a lot of plot armor during those times.
Especially because you didn't really see, or at least I can't think of anybody else getting that kind of treatment. It felt like everybody, when other people would die or have something horrific happen to them, they were just, goners. So I think maybe if somebody would have been exposed to some toxic amount of radiation at the beginning of the book and then like gotten fixed up, then it might have made that land a little bit better or felt a little bit more believable. But
Right. They set it up right from the beginning, like, hey, we got to make it to the ship. It'll have like, we're going to suffer some radiation poisoning, but it'll have medicine.
But didn't like I feel like it was Holden, didn't he like, maybe it was Miller, didn't they like one of them break his arm like right when they're like getting to the ship or something? And then like they hardly even reference that throughout the rest of the book.
I mean, that's again like the sci-fi thing. Like they have, it's like, I don't
But
know.
like another character like broke his leg and they kind of referenced that he was still having trouble with his broken leg throughout it. So it just kind of felt like some of the medical like things that these characters went through just were magically like hand waved away.
Well, I mean, it's that one took place on like a short range shuttle that they were like barely surviving on. That was when their main ship, the Canterbury, exploded, right? And they were surviving on that short range shuttle. And then the other was on like a state of the art Martian Marine or Martian Navy ship, that would
That's
probably be more equipped to handle injury. So I mean, I don't know, as far as like that didn't really bother me.
I think
they
Ben's
took
point,
a long rest. Like you're getting all your hit points.
I think Ben, what I'm hearing Ben saying, like, I don't think he's saying that these are necessarily plot points, but they do kind
Plot
of make
holes,
it
you mean?
harder, or plot holes. Sorry, they're not necessarily plot holes, but they do make it a little bit harder to get invested in the stakes of the book, is my opinion on it, at least.
I can see that for sure. What would you say were some negatives, Ryan? Some weaknesses?
I think I would agree. Also, maybe the character work. But I mean, since we've already talked about that so much, another negative that I felt was, to an extent, the romance between Jim Holden and Naomi. It seemed a little like abrupt when, he had just survived on Eros and he was all of a sudden like, I love you, Naomi. I mean, I do like how she reacted, where she was like,
you liked half the people on the ship.
she's like,
Get
you've been like, I mean, I like you, but you've been sleeping around a lot and I don't think you love me. And until you're like ready to show me that you love me, then we're not really, this isn't gonna happen. So I did like that. And but I do feel like maybe it was just a bit abrupt for me. Like it didn't really develop. There weren't quite as many like clues before leading up to it, like deeper talks where you could tell like, oh, like maybe they're getting feelings. It was kind of just like Holden would look at Naomi and be like, wow, she's a really good mechanic.
Yeah, and then
it's
you'd
like,
have Miller
oh.
kind of noticing stuff between them,
So to me, that whole sequence, Ryan, kind of felt like a fantasy where it's like, oh, I like you, but you're just too much of a stud and you're just like too sleeping around too much. And I do love you, but like,
That wasn't what she was saying.
Not really, but it felt
She
like
was-
it felt a little bit to me like how like a 17-year-old kid would write a book, like putting themselves in the novel, like every woman wants to get with me, but they just know I have, a reputation. So they got to kind of make sure I really like them first.
That wasn't it at all, though. That's funny. Sorry, when I get to my critique, I can follow up on that. But I will address that. That is a bad interpretation. What she wasn't saying like you're too much of a, like you're sleeping around too much and like I need you to like it wasn't anything like that. What it was is it was more the fact that he was saying that he loved her and acting like that, and she's like, you don't even know what that means. Like you think you've been in that, like in this serious of a relationship with everyone, and like you jump in way too fast and you don't like, like, I'm not going to do that because like you need to actually get to that point. Like we need to, like, this needs to actually develop in a relationship. So in my head, that was more of a like checking that kind of trope of like fantasy or any sort of storytelling of like, all of a sudden we're in love, like kind of like inverting that, like, no, that's not how people are. And kind of him, because he is such a romantic, him having to like check himself on that. Anyways, you can continue, Ryan.
So the other thing that when I thought a little bit about it, and maybe I need a different perspective, but Miller's obsessiveness over Julie Mao is a little strange when I kind of look at
creepy.
it from like a different perspective, because he's like a middle-aged detective, divorced, and he's like really clinging to this girl like Julie, who's, you know, probably in her, I don't know, like mid-20s. I'm not exactly sure on the ages, but she's significantly younger than him, and I don't know, maybe age isn't, it's not as like taboo in this world for somebody so much older. But he like really becomes so obsessed with her, like basically he like loses his job over like the fact that he can't let Julie go.
Okay.
And
okay, sorry, I'll let you finish.
And so I mean, it seems like his obsessiveness seems a bit weird. And I guess, you know, him as a character, he's like pretty broken and flawed, and so maybe he's just kind of looking for, like, he doesn't know it, but he's really looking for something to give his life back some meaning. And, you know, this girl who he you know, he sees like all of the good in her, and he kind of idolizes her in his head. And like, she needs me, like she has nobody else, like the police station isn't really giving her what she needs, or giving her the attention that she needs, and he feels like he can. I don't know. I'm interested to hear Ben's perspective.
So I agree with that, but I think if you view it, so I was really agreeing with that until he got fired, and they were basically like he realized that he himself was like the like washed up detective, you know, kind of like that moment of clarity for him. And then if you view it, and then by the end of the book where he essentially commits suicide, you kind of view him as spiraling down into like mental, you know, like collapse almost. And so I think that his obsession with Julie is for sure like a symptom of his overall like mental state, not like a cause of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to interpret that.
So
also just him needing to find the answer to everything, even like at all costs. That's a big part of his big part of his character.
But even then, he like views himself as like extremely capable of finding the cause, and other people don't really view him that way. So you can like even make an argument that and maybe he used to be that way,
but like deluded.
Currently he's kind of in his own head kind of made himself out to be like this awesome detective, whereas like he's really just the guy that they stick the, you know, like,
because he's not a good detective.
People. Yeah.
Right. Did you want to continue, Ryan, or
no? I think that we should, if you have some weaknesses you want to discuss, Jake, but I want to get to the strength of what we liked.
Yeah. I will say, like I said before, I do think the characters are probably the weaker part of the book. Mostly I thought the plot was really good, but there were some weak parts there where, along with the Julie Mao thing, I did think it was kind of a trope to have like, oh, of course, like the missing girl is the key to like solving the final conflict. That was kind of like, I don't know, that was kind of disappointing, especially after like that moment. Like I liked Agent Miller's like character arc so much, like that we just talked about, like that realization of like he's kind of full of himself, you know, the whole book, and then having that crushing moment of realizing, oh, I totally misread the situation. I'm not as good as I thought I was. And And then when he finds Julie Mao and she's like taken over and like dead, I thought that was a cool way to do it. Like that was kind of like some George R.R. Martin stuff, because it was building up to having her be like the trope would be she would be the key to end the conflict, but then she's dead. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, where's this going to go now? And then it went back to her being the key at the end. And I felt like that was kind of weak. It was made sense. Like, and it was cool how things were resolved. Like the plot, like everything that happened, like the plot developments were cool, but just the fact that she was the key again was kind of a meh. And then I also think, and I don't know, you guys can tell me whether this is a strength or a weakness, I just thought James Holden's character was kind of annoying. Like the moments when he was, it was either like the characters were underdeveloped, which like doesn't bother me too much if the plot is good enough. But then like he would do things that were just so frustrating. And then half the time, like trying to realize like with the love interest thing, like, oh, the author did that on purpose to show like he's really naive, not naive, naive in a romantic, which is why he names, you know, like the ship after Don Quixote and everything. Like that's part of his character flaw. But then just like when he, to Josh's point, not that he's solved things with like without warrant or without earning it, but just when he did solve things, he just came off like, I think those are supposed to be coming off as like these big hero moments. And instead it was just like, oh man, like you needed, like he was full of himself in a different way. And maybe, I mean, there you go. There's a similarity. I think they were both like full of themselves. And again, that sense of like, they both think what they're doing is right. Anyways, so that was probably, those are the weakest parts in my head, in my opinion. I will say some of the strongest parts to me and things I really liked about it were the intricate plot and politicking. I think was done super well. Like it really reminded me again of like Game of Thrones, the way they're setting up all the different chess pieces of these factions and like the tensions that are there and how misinformation, miscommunication, and assumptions really like ruin things. I like how every time like Holden would say the truth, like broadcast the truth of a situation, it would cause basically lies to end up, you know, like not truth to end up everywhere, and how that would jettison things.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I didn't say Mars did it. I just said that the battery is Mars. It's like, well, what did you think was going to happen, you idiot? Like,
yeah, but I love that, like that idea of like you're trying to do good, but the consequences are you're going to happen. What's going to happen? And I thought that was like done really well, and like all these things that didn't really seem to make sense, all of a sudden at the end of the book, we're like, oh, that's why these things happened. And like the weaker characters didn't bother me as much because they were kind of just swept away in the story. But
I will agree that I thought like it made it, because a lot of times the struggle with fantasy, right, with politics is to try and keep track of all the houses. You know, you're like, I don't know, Starkland, like it is like mentally taxing to do that. But with this, like they were all super distinct because it was just Mars and Earth kind of had a, you know, alliance, but maybe not. And then the Belters and then Protogen, like those are kind of like the four things that you know keep track of. And we can anchor ourselves in our own world in order to kind of see how all those would naturally fit together. And they did do a good job of kind of naturally fitting together while also having those tensions. So I thought that was a good part of the book too.
And I think the detective story, the way they had it, the resolution to that and how it opened up a larger conflict, not just was the resolution good, but the larger conflict that I assume is going to be like the core of the series, I thought was really interesting. And the way it ended made me super excited to see where things are going to go with the series further.
By larger conflict, you mean like the seed that was kind of like sent towards Earth and how Protogen was trying to develop it.
Yeah, all of it, like Phoebe being sent from like something outside of the solar system, the proto-molecule, and especially how Eros became sentient and is landing on Venus, and just like, okay, you know that is not the end of that. Like, you know, something's going to grow out of it. But
so I agree with Jake on those strengths. I think the plot and the politicking were both interesting. Like for this book, it does kind of keep things pretty close and simple. So I mean, you're focused on Jim Holden, his crew, Miller, a little bit of Fred Johnson and the OPA, and you kind of, they have these actions, and then you see like the cascade, the consequences that these actions are having on the greater galaxy. Like you get glimpses of them where they're like, they don't talk about them in depth. I think the show does, in the first season, they do introduce characters that aren't introduced until like maybe the second or third book. And so you do see more of the political factions that are happening on Earth and Mars and how they're interacting as this all goes down. So I think that's something that the show does a bit differently as well, is that it introduces those things. I think that from the whole proto-molecule thing is so fascinating, and it's, what is it about this? Because it's, when it comes down to it, like, this is so interesting, but it's done in like so many different ways, right? Because like essentially they're almost like zombies, right? Because this virus is it hijacks their body, kills them, hijacks their body, and then spreads. And we see it in Halo with the flood. We saw in there's something similar in one of the Children of Time books. This is like just a very this like some other molecule virus that takes over life and alters it in a way that's scary to us. I don't know that it just appeals to our like primal sense of fear or something, but it's like very compelling. I don't know that I would really call it a weakness, just that it's so done, because I feel like
it's a trope. Yeah,
I mean, it's a trope with but they have like their own unique take on it, and it seems like it's almost a bioweapon that's been engineered by some other sentient species and sent towards Earth.
Like Speaker for the Dead a little bit too,
or the 2007 hit novel The Host
by Stephanie Meyers.
A little different from The Host.
I don't even
but I'm liking the connection.
I don't know if that was 2007, by the way, but
sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
And I think these books, it definitely scratches that space opera itch that I had. I mean, I don't like love space opera. I don't dislike it. It's just not really a genre that I seek out very often. So I think it does it well though, and I really liked it.
Yeah, I was gonna say one of the big pros for me is like it was just at that sweet spot of sci-fi for me where I felt like I might have actually like learned a few things from it, but I never felt like I was, like asked to figure out the like complexities of the space-time continuum while I was reading. You know what I mean? Like,
wasn't the three-body problem?
Yeah. That's a specific reference, the three-body.
So I actually have never read that, so it was an inadvertent reference.
Okay.
It was like, okay, you're dealing with like G's and like trying to like there's some limitations that are being talked about. You're also seeing like I love the like Nauvoo, like where the Mormons are like gonna go out and colonize this like space. Like there's
I was so sad that got ruined. Like it
They're
was
like,
killing
we're
me.
Gonna steal your ship.
Yeah, well, it killed me inside. Like
it didn't get ruined though, right? Because it didn't hit. So it's still, I think they're still gonna sell it.
Isn't it headed towards the sun now though?
Well, I'm sure that they could do a U-turn eventually.
I don't know.
Is there anybody on it, or are they piloting it remotely?
I think they just piloted it.
I don't know, maybe not, but
that was like, oh, what a waste. And
so,
then it missed.
But yeah, there's like all sorts of like these kind of sci-fi things that I did feel like it was a big pro of the story for me. Now I haven't read a ton of sci-fi, so maybe I'm maybe it's been done a ton better like in other places, but I really enjoyed that aspect of the book.
Josh, do you have anything good to say? Or?
Come on, Josh. You guys. So overall, right? Like, I think that this was a fun book. I think that it was a enjoyable like ride. I thought that the plot did keep me interested. Like I was ready to figure out what happened. Like I wasn't as bummed as Jake was that the girl was the key to the whole thing, because I thought that they set that up all right in the prologue. Like that
but they did such a pull the rug from under you, and I was like,
yeah,
that's such a good
I know.
pull.
You're right. You're right.
But then it wasn't.
Yeah. And then I kind of echoing what everybody else said. Like it was the sweet spot of sci-fi for me, where it wasn't too intense, but it provided for some cool settings. I will say that I did, and I know we're supposed to be talking about positives right now, but like whenever they're just kind of going from ship to ship, like that does kind of get it hard to, I don't have the best, what's that inner eye thing called, where like people have varying degrees of how well they picture things. I don't have the best, like one of the, like, I don't picture things in like intricate detail. So when they're just kind of going from like ship to ship, it kind of got lost on me. But that was just kind of something I noticed while looking back. Like I don't have a real good like image of kind of the different settings that they were on the book, but I didn't really notice that while I was reading it, so it must not have been too bad.
I think that watching the TV show helped me a bit. I mean, I think sometimes it's positive because I can picture when they're on the Rocinante, like, you know, what the set looks like on the TV show. And when they're on Tycho Station or Eros, I can sort of picture that. I mean, sometimes it hurts when you're not a big fan of an actor and it's like, you know, now you just imagine the actor now as that character. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I want to imagine like my own Holden or Miller. And
yeah,
I was the whole time I was never mind. I was gonna say kind of the actors I imagined for them, but it's probably just not worth saying.
Yeah,
kind of casting somebody that's already been casted.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, Josh, hijacked your.
No, I don't really have much value to add. Like I just don't want it to come away that I thought was a bad book. I just kind of already said the issues I had with it, and I hadn't really heard anybody talk about those issues. I'm sure they do on like, you know, I'm not on the Reddit or whatever for this book. But I just hadn't heard anyone talk about the issues.
So we can kind of give a final score, final rating. I thought echoing what we've all said, that I think it is that like a really good combination of more classic sci-fi, of like it's a little harder, whereas like everything feels very real, like this could happen, like technology, it just needs to be a little further.
It almost feels like inevitable for it to happen.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like, oh, we discovered this magic technology and now like our world is basically real except for this magic. It's just like this is a natural progression, and the like factions motives reflect or seem very real to me, like the OPA and that final like standoff between the Rocinante and like Earth and Mars's forces. Like anyways, I'm gonna give the book a solid, probably a rounded up 8 out of 10. I think it's a solid entry. Like it's a solid entry in a series, and it makes me really interested in continuing and seeing where it goes.
I thought yours was going to be higher, Jake.
No, I mean, I think it definitely had its weaknesses, but I really liked it. And it has room to grow for sure.
I think that my final score would probably be around a 6 out of 10. Again, like I liked it. Like a 6 out of 10 I think is still a good book, and so I'm planning on continuing reading it. I probably shouldn't have hyped it up so much at Hot Takes, but yeah, 6 out of 10 is where I landed.
6 out of 10 sounds kind of brutal to me, but
well, you gave it an 8 out of 10, but like 5 out of 10 for me is an average book, so 6 out of 10 is like an above average book.
Is it, or is 7 out of 10 an average book?
No, 7 out of 10 is a good book. Like it's a
going off of American grading systems, or
see, I do think that
I've never heard Josh give a 5 out of 10 for the record.
I have.
Okay.
Maybe we approach scoring a bit differently.
Everyone does, and that's why this is.
There's no way a 5 out of 10 is an average. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You're right. And if you were to average out my total reviews, it would come nowhere near close to a 5 out of 10. But that's because I generally read books that I think I'm going to really like. So So it's not the true average, but like
If
okay.
Josh had read every book in the universe, he would give an average of 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I feel like I only pull from books that I think are going to be above a 5. So then my average probably falls.
Well, then how
close.
would you know what a low score book? Never mind.
Because-
Okay.
Josh, what would the host
We're
by
getting deep.
Stephanie Meyers be?
See that would be like a 2 or 3 out of 10. You know,
Oh, wow.
No, that's a 5. That's one where
I
That's
can't
a 5.
I don't
Okay.
feel like wow.
I remember
that was a
not
waste of
liking it.
time.
I remember not
Okay,
liking
we
it.
don't know review
And
the
I
host
was
right now.
like 15 when I read it.
Tune
so
in next time for the host.
Yeah. If this video gets over however many likes, we should read the host.
Dude, I'd read it again for sure.
Okay.
All right, Ryan never got to give a score. It was hijacked
I still want
by
to give a score
Josh's.
too. Let's go. Ryan.
Ben, you give your score. You seem excited about it.
So I was going to do a 7 out of 10. I think I'm going to go 8 out of 10 just because I like the point that Jake made that this is a first book. And I don't think that I've, like, one of my favorite reasons why I love recommending Mistborn to people is because you can stop reading after the first book and have it be like a solid story. And I feel like this does that as well. Like you can just, read it. If you like it, then you can keep reading it. If you're like, then you can just have had a fantastic first book experience. So I'm going to go 8 out of 10 because of that.
So I think that it's hard because I've seen so much of the TV show and I really like the TV show. And so I do feel like it's influencing my scoring of the book. I want to give it an 8.5 out of 10. And the reason why I do that is Jake talked a bit about this, just how I felt like the plot was well wrapped up in this. It ended at a good point at the end of the book, just in terms of the proto-molecule and Miller, Miller and Julie kind of flying off into Venus together. But it leaves it open for some very interesting things to happen in the future, especially with the proto-molecule, obviously, but also with politics between Mars and Earth and the OPA. All of those things I feel like are, they have very interesting motivations and sub-factions inside of them that I'm looking forward to reading more about. And so I think that it was very interesting. I really like this premise. I think that the character work wasn't like very detrimental in my read through. I think that I noticed it, but I still liked it. And it's just a great sci-fi fun read. Yeah, that's why a great debut novel.
Yeah.
So probably average 7.5 out of 10, given Josh's outlier score. That's at least.
I'll bump mine up to 6.5. I thought you guys were good. I honestly thought you guys were going to like give it closer to like 7, between 7 and 8. So I wanted to make it like different enough from you, but you guys were all between 8 and 8.5. So
I think that I
I'll say
generally
6.5.
I think I might trend a bit higher in my scores. Like on Goodreads, I feel like I usually give things like a 4. If I really like it, I'll give it a 5 stars. And then if I don't like it, I'll give it 3 stars and maybe very rarely a 2 star.
If you're like, nobody should read this book, 2 star.
Yeah.
We need to have what we need to do next time, it's all 5 of us, is just talk about
A rating
systems and like the strengths, the flaws, like how should you interpret a rating system? Like how do you even rate a book or anything, That'd be fun.
I feel like ratings are like so nebulous too, because like so much depends on like your reading experience, like at least for me. I mean, I don't feel like at Fantology we really like are holding ourselves up to be like, you should listen to our opinions about books. And if we give a book, I get annoyed when critics are like, I like this, so therefore everybody should like it. I feel like we're like, okay, let's talk about this book, what we liked about, what we didn't like it, and then people can make their decisions about it. So having said that, I feel like with me, so much can go into whether like I give a good book a good rating or a bad rating. And a lot of that has to do with like where I am at while I'm reading it, like if I'm in a good mood or a bad mood, or like if I'm really excited to be reading it or not. So that's I like recognize that I have a lot of bias when I
Dang, so maybe 15-year-old Josh did not like the host because his crush
No,
was.
I'm gonna say the host was more 2009. That's my
probably.
guess.
I feel like
he didn't
yeah.
like it because he wasn't emotionally mature enough to appreciate
She
it.
didn't get the nuance of it.
The host. Dang, the film came out in 2013.
There's a movie.
Yeah.
I've seen the movie.
Oh.
I haven't read
Let's
the
do, let's
book.
do a viewing party.
We should figure out how to do watch parties for Fantology. That'd be way fun.
I think that
All right, guys, I gotta take off here.
Anyways, that's our episode of Leviathan Wakes. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be continuing with Caliban's War. I assume all of us are on board to read that. Maybe we can get Steven in on this too. Make sure to follow us on your social medias. Join your Discord if you can, and
Tell
thanks.
us why Holden and Miller are different people.
Yeah, tell us why we're wrong on the Discord. We do like to discuss the books
Yeah,
there.
and on the YouTube comments. Yeah.
All right,
right.
see you guys.
See you
Peace.
guys.